So today I'm going to be talking about the theory of change, culturally responsive education. This is my chapter critique. So let's start off with talking about what culturally responsive education is. So culturally responsive education is defined as a mental model useful for identifying themes and tools of practice for closing equity gaps. And we have to think about equity gaps as a disparity along race, economics, gender. We have to be able to understand a student's ability, social identity markers of any kind. So mental models support processing and decision-making, that clarification of the variables and consequences of our thinking in order to direct or subsequent actions. So now we have to kind of talk about what being responsiveness is. So what I really gathered from this is that responsiveness facilitates from trust. Teacher and student has to have trust with one another. So it's essential for our most vulnerable students to be willing to take risks associated with rigorous learning. So to have that responsiveness, they have to have trust. And they have to trust the teacher and their peers that they're not going to be made fun of. They're not going to be judged or anything like that. And the teacher has to trust them in return that they're going to do what is expected of them by setting those high expectations. Responsiveness is also the capacity for providing access to powerful understanding along with meaningful supports for learning. It's when instruction becomes more personal and therefore more engaging. So you're changing what needs to happen to ensure that students are fully engaged and fully responding to your lessons. The learning experience is designed with the specific needs and interests in mind of those students, with their background and language as leverage. So using what they know. Previous learning is connected in ways that highlight pathways for them. So definitely using what they already know to help change what you teach them currently. Use their language, use all of that and their background to leverage the new content. It also kind of compared responsiveness to relevance. So it explained that relevant meant that cultural symbols are embedded into the learning. However, that is very baseline, just hitting the surface. But to be responsive, we dig deeper into their culture, their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their abilities, their social identity once again. And we're responding to that as teachers and building that into our lessons. So we don't want to just be relevant and hit the baseline. We want to dig deeper and we want to be that responsiveness teacher. The next thing we're going to talk about is the 5 essential elements of culturally responsive teaching. So the 5 elements for cultural responsive teaching is number 1, developing a knowledge base about cultural diversity. So as a teacher, we need to understand what cultural diversity really means. Number 2, including ethnic and cultural diversity content in the curriculum. So actually talking about people or time periods that have ethnic and cultural diversity in it. Including things in that content that connects to the students and the cultures that you have represented in your class. Number 3, demonstrating caring and building learning communities. So showing that empathy between peers, supporting each other in their learning, cheering each other on, helping each other out when someone is weak in one area and they can teach each other, supporting that learning community. Number 4, communicating with ethnical diverse students. You have to be able to communicate with those students in any way you can. If that means you have a translator or a translating system, you have to communicate with those families and that teacher any way you can. And if that means you need to use visual cues, whatever, you have to be able to communicate with them. Number 5, responding to ethnic diversity in the delivery of instruction. So again, you've got to respond. You've got to be able to change and engage ethnic diversity in your delivery of your instruction. So your actual lesson, you have to be able to include that in your lessons. So the family narrative, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this because it really highlights everything we've already kind of talked about in the last 5 minutes. In this chapter, it really explained an activity that a team of grade level did, and it kind of encompasses all of that. So they did a family narrative at this school, and as a team, they decided that they were going to have the kids work on understanding themes in their literature unit and explore narratives in their own family. So what they did is they taught students what an interview looks like, how it should go, the type of questions that are open-ended that you should ask, and really dug deep into that, showed examples and all that. Then they actually brought in, so if I was the teacher, I brought in my mom and interviewed my mom and modeled that for the students. So think about it. They're watching their teacher interview their own mother. First of all, it just connected it and made it so much more interesting for all those students to bring that lesson to life and just bring it to the center attention to them. And so then they actually got to see an interview in progress and that conversation happening. So then the students actually went home, and all of the students received a device so that they were capable of actually completing the assignment based on their needs at home. So they brought home a device and they recorded their interview with a family member. Then they came back, once they were all finished with their interviews that weekend, they came back and with a peer, they watched their interview. After they watched the interview, they had peer conversation and reflection. They gave feedback to each other. What could you have done better? Could we have changed the question here? Could you have added stuff? They had that peer conversation. So then with their revised interview, they went in for a update interview. So they tried it again. They recorded their interview. And then again, second time, they came and they did a peer reflection, and they watched each other's interview and learned from each other. Then finally, they wrote and typed up a narrative writing piece based on what they learned about their family in their family interview. What the teachers and the students reflected on when this assignment was completely over was that the teachers found out that their kids can be so much better human beings when they feel connected to amazing stories that come from their family, their inherited stories. The students, it even said in here that one of the students had stopped the teacher and said, you made me get even closer to my dad. I mean, that is just heartwarming. It connected them more with their family members and just made it so much more meaningful to them. Also, one of the other things that it stated was that the students actually, through this assignment, have written other narrative pieces, but with this assignment, they had more enriched discussion, more enriched papers, and they dug deeper with their papers and were more elaborate with all of their content. So it shows that when you add family and when you add their culture and you make it interesting and engaging to those students and on their level, they're more likely to be more engaged and actually take it seriously and want to do it. I thought this was an amazing way to look at culturally responsive education. I really want to do this for my class, but I don't teach writing, I teach reading. So wondering if maybe my class can find a book or something that would be along the same lines, an interview that leads to them finding a book with their family or something. But making sure that we're being aware of what culture diversity means, including culture diversity in our content and curriculum, building those learning communities with those pairs so that they feel safe, and then communicating with those students what they can do a little bit better, and also communicating with the parents that these assignments are coming home and all of that, and then also responding and ensuring that we are providing that culturally responsive education. Thank you.